Hello, thank you for joining us. This is the Friendly Reminder Podcast. It's your weekly friendly reminder of what's going on in our lives around the world and everything in between. Today is September the 10th, and my name is Gus, and as always, I'll be your host for the evening. I do have, as always, my two dear friends with me. Introducing first, Daniel, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Lots to cover today as usual. And Sam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. Anxious to get started.
As always. So yeah, let's get started, guys, because, I'm sure all of our listeners are aware, but it still bears repeating that COVID-19 is still a threat. Even now in September, we're still getting about 30,000 new cases a day. We still get over 1,000 newly reported deaths, unfortunately, pretty much every single day. We are over 6 million infected throughout, since the pandemic started here in America. And sadly, very sadly, over 190,000 deaths. And it's pretty much inevitable that we're going to reach that grim milestone of over 200,000 Americans dead. So, schools are opening back up. Football's starting again. I mean, we still are insisting on getting this show on the road, but it's a very clear reminder that this is still a very active virus. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because, as I'm sure many have heard, the most recent event on the news right now is some recordings from an interview, several interviews, in fact, I believe 18 interviews in total between the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and very famous reporter, journalist, Bob of the Washington Post, Bob Woodward, where
he very smartly decided to talk 18 separate times to Bob Woodward on the phone, on the record, and let him record him. So
yeah, I'm wondering the thought process about that, because this is Bob Woodward. For those not familiar with Bob Woodward, he was very much involved in the Watergate scandal back in the 60s. He was played by, I believe, Robert Redford in All the President's Men, a very famous movie I believe that was done in the 80s. It was Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman, the 70s. A very famous journalist, a very famous investigative reporter, and somehow Donald Trump just decided to call him up and just be like, "Hey, Bobby, get a load of this shit."
He wrote books critical of Obama. He wrote books critical of the Bush administration, and he also wrote a book called Fear about the Trump administration, which made Trump look like a jackass. So I'm not sure why.
What doesn't make Trump look like a jackass is my question.
Trump is a Fox News viewer, so he thinks that he's a brilliant genius. So he thinks that when he gets on the phone with Bob Woodward, he's just going to be able to explain everything away. And he's also used to just not really caring about consistency at all, which is another reason why he gets on the phone and just starts talking about how COVID is much worse He gets on the phone and he starts talking about how COVID is much more contagious and 5 times deadlier than the flu, at least 5 times deadlier than the worst flus. He says it's bad. It doesn't just hurt old people. It hurts kids. Meanwhile, and people have cut these together. He's going out there and he's saying the exact opposite out in the to the public. He's just lying. He's saying this isn't a threat. It's going to disappear soon.
Yeah, and we should note that these interviews took place a while ago, before the pandemic really took hold here in America. In fact, one of them is from February the 7th. Another one, I believe, is from March the 19th. So this is Donald Trump being fully aware of what this virus was capable of, and the pain and damage and deaths and suffering that it was capable of, well before any of this started, and well before we all started essentially living our lives from home.
News organizations are still trying to piece this stuff together, but I have seen some crazy contrasts. Like on the 7th, Trump gets on the phone, and again, this is recorded, so you can't call it fake news, blah, blah, blah. Gets on the phone with Woodward and tells him that the virus is airborne, worse than the flu, 5 times as deadly, more contagious. And so that conversation takes place on the 7th. From the 10th of February to March the 2nd, Trump holds 5 different rallies.
Yeah.
Following that, with thousands of people in confined spaces, no masks, no social distancing, anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think even after these, at least the February 7th interview, he literally posted a tweet saying like, "Hey, 30,000 people die from the flu every year. What's the big? We don't shut down for that. Like, what's the big deal about this?" When he already knew it was much worse than the flu, and this is a president still.
He knew it was at least 5 times worse than the flu. I don't know if you do a little back of the envelope, 5 times whatever 30,000. Get you pretty close to where we are right now. So, I mean, it's kind of amazing that this idiot was out there and made claims about the virus that weren't true, that it was going to disappear, that we had kicked it, that there was no cases in the US, that there were only 15 cases and it was all going to disappear soon. Meanwhile, not suggesting any kind of distancing or anything like that, not putting dragging his feet every step of the way. Even on his favorite thing, shutting down borders, he dragged his feet every step of the way, and he had to have his staff beg him to close down borders to shut down travel from Europe and China before that. So I mean, it's not surprising to anybody who's been paying attention. Another little tidbit of keeping this in time is this was literally 2 days after he was acquitted by every single Republican for after being impeached for being manifestly unfit for the job. So obviously he immediately turned around and proved once again that he's manifestly unfit for the job.
Yeah, congratulations, Susan Collins. You really taught him a lesson.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the benefits we have here is that, as you mentioned, Daniel, Bob Woodward did record this. It is on the record. So, if you have that handy, do you mind playing a clip of one of the interviews?
I'm going to go ahead and play the February 7th one.
And so, what was President Xi saying yesterday?
Well, we were talking mostly about the virus, and I think he's going to have it in good shape, but it's a very tricky situation. It goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. The touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. People don't realize we lose 25,000, 30,000 people a year here. Who would ever think that, right?
I know. It's
pretty amazing. And then I say, well, is that the same thing? This is more deadly. This is 5 per, this is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. So this is deadly stuff.
Yeah. So he says he fully acknowledges this is more deadly, more contagious than the flu. Airborne, and this was before the WHO was even saying that was airborne. So this was very early on. He was apparently getting this information directly from President Xi of China. Numerous instances after this comparing it directly to the flu, saying, "Oh, it's just the flu. It's just going to go away." Remember when he said, "Oh yeah, people they're going to work," where he didn't say people should go to work, but subtly suggested that it might be okay if you just kept going to work while you had COVID, and you would just recover from it. That was still ahead.
This particular clip is where he pretty much admits, and we'll talk about it afterwards, but where he pretty much admits to downplaying the virus for the purpose of quote unquote not creating a panic. But yeah, if you don't mind, Daniel, let's just go ahead and play the clip.
Now it's turning out it's not just old people, Bob. Just today and yesterday, some startling facts came out. It's not just older.
Yeah, exactly.
Young people, to plenty of young people.
So
what's going on?
Give me a moment of talking to somebody, going through this with Fauci or somebody who kind of it caused a pivot in your mind, because it's clear just from what's on the public record that you went through a pivot on this to, oh my God, the gravity is almost inexplicable and unexplainable.
Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you.
Sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes.
Because I don't want to create a panic.
So that was from March 19th, and yeah, he said I've been playing it down. I always want to play it down. He says, "Oh, I don't want to create a panic," which, famously Trump always trying to calm people down, never trying to make people panic.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Well, I mean that's essentially what I was going to mention, because now what you're seeing is that his supporters, or even some of the former anti-Trumpers now turned Trumpers, are defending this particular commentary, saying, hey, it's presidential, right? Like, it's presidential that he does not want to incite a panic or cause chaos. So he was trying to play it down just so people can be orderly. But I mean, two things about that. The first one is what you mentioned, Daniel, that this is Donald Trump. He does not have a history. This is the guy that uses fear and chaos and disorder whenever he can. He does it when it comes to...
Today, between tweets about how he was trying to keep people calm, he was like, Antifa is coming over and they're going to knock over your lawn ornaments and they're going to pee in your bird bath. And he's doing this as he's saying, I was trying to keep people calm about COVID. So
yeah, it's like, oh yeah, now this is the one where you just decide that you're just gonna downplay it to make sure that everything's orderly. You don't do that with the protests. You don't do that with the voting, with mailing voting. Oh, but you're gonna do it with this. So that's a hard argument to buy. But furthermore, like,
it's not a hard argument to buy. It's complete bullshit.
Yeah.
I don't even think we should entertain it as a plausible argument.
I mean, he's basically being a fearmonger no matter what he does. Like, especially with the COVID stuff. I mean, even if he didn't say anything early on, a lot of panic is still going through this, or going with this.
Because he didn't do anything to reduce panic. Because instead of coming out and saying this is a terrible thing and we're going to have to take it seriously, he said, it's fake. And then proceeded to just fuck it up and kill 200,000 people and create a massive economic recession that went along with it. None of that reduced panic. All of it increased panic. If he had come out and stated at the beginning, and that March 19th call referenced, oh, Trump's becoming more serious. I don't know if you guys remember, but in early March, I think Fauci told Trump that it could be 300,000 people dead. And I think like he showed up and randomly changed his tone and the media was like, oh, he changed his tone. It was complete bullshit. It happened for like 10 minutes. And then, the next day he was talking about how we needed to, quote unquote, liberate the cities, which meant to eliminate all the public health, all the things that they were doing as far as public health goes to quell the coronavirus. And he was literally going out there and tweeting, in all caps, liberate Michigan or whatever. And this was after, quote unquote, he changed his tone in March and was taking it seriously. So the question, Sam, I think you asked is, would it have made a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only reason we're kind of entertaining this is because we don't have a president that's fit to lead. Because the real dilemma for an actual president, for somebody that would take the office seriously, is how do you convince your citizens to not panic while taking this seriously? Right, like that's the real dilemma that a real president would actually want to face or would be required to face. Donald Trump did neither of those. He did not, or at least he did not message that. He messaged that this should not be taken seriously. But then his actual actions, the way he said that we were just going to close down everything coming from Europe, and it was believed it was also like commodities and goods, and so there were like the market tanked, and then people panicked, and lots of people just started traveling from Europe to America immediately because they thought they were going to be left in Europe. So
yeah, those pictures of hundreds and thousands of people getting stranded at airports because they didn't know what the fuck was going on right in the midst of a pandemic, all crowded together in the airports. Yeah, that was the panic that he was that's the panic that he was apparently trying to downplay. It didn't work. And I think a lot of people are like, well, what would have happened if Bob Woodward had released this. I think that's a fair question. I think Trump would have reacted kind of like he's reacting now, which is to say, well, it's fake news, and never mind that he's on tape. It's fake news, and it doesn't mean what they're saying it means, and he probably would have continued to downplay it. I'm going to be honest. I think he would have continued to downplay it. And I think Republicans would have continued to downplay it. And as soon as it got serious again, he would say, well, no one could have seen this. He would have said what he said, which is nobody could have seen this coming. And then people would point to the Bob Woodward stuff, and I don't know, it would just go around. And so, I mean, Gus, couldn't you see that exact thing happening? Like it could have come out, but I mean, would it have made that much of a difference? I think they would have still continued on this path of downplaying the shit out of it. And
I mean, I think whether this would have made a difference if it came out sooner is a hard question to answer, because you don't know with this moron of a president we have. I believe I buy your argument, Daniel. I think he would have continued to downplay it if I really had to guess. I do think in terms of like an ethical dilemma placed on Bob Woodward, like if you find this, if you found out about this back in February or March, do you feel obligated to release it just to inform the public, whatever happens, however the president acts or however his supporters acts is irrelevant? It's more like, is it more? Are you morally responsible holding this information back from the people until now, or should you have released it back then? That's a tough question for me to answer. I'm not entirely sure if that's an argument I want to go into, because I think the main thing here is Bob Woodward is not the president of the United States, right? Ultimately, like the responsibility ends with Donald Trump, and I think there's going to be a lot of people.
Yeah, that has been the reaction. I saw we were talking about this clip before the show started, where Trump was like, if this was so important, then Woodward should have informed the authorities. It made me laugh so
Which
hard.
is insane.
Because
it's
he's
insane.
literally the president of the United States. He's like the highest authority, and he's like, yeah, Woodward should have like called the police or something.
Yeah. If he had this vital information, why didn't he let the people know?
Yeah.
So, do you guys remember back in the 2016 election? I mean, this seems very similar to what they're doing now about the Bob Woodward thing. I don't remember who Trump was with. It was Billy
Bush.
Billy Bush.
You're talking about the Access Hollywood tape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it pissed me off, and I think it pissed off a lot of not ignorant people, I guess. But it still played it off as if it was nothing.
Yeah, I mean, that goes into the whole, like, are we in the nothing matters universe where these things can just happen and there's absolutely no consequence or repercussions for it? Like, is this still going to lead to Donald Trump being reelected, even though in any other universe, having this on tape would lead to any president being either just ousted by voting or being impeached or something like that in a rational society? I see your point that it kind of echoes that, Sam, because back then you thought he's like, oh, that's it, right? Like this tape is it. Like this is a man basically admitting on tape that he just violates women without hesitating. So that should be it, and it wasn't. So I don't want to say this is it. I'm not going to say here, oh, that's it. Trump is doomed. But this is just like I'm just looking at.
Just to give you an idea of what a normal president might have done, there was a Columbia University School of Public Health study released recently that said starting social distancing 1 week earlier. The thing about pandemics is that the science of it, they know kind of what to do to stop diseases from spreading, but it's hard. You have to do it before the disease starts manifesting itself, because once it starts manifesting itself, it's already spread and it's too late. You have to cut it off before it starts spreading. Folks that run our government in the GOP are idiots, and they're not going to do anything until everything is already on fire, and now they have to do something. So that's why I'm talking about the science behind the epidemiological science behind pandemics. the earlier you start, the better it is. And it's just, it goes back to flattening the curve. The sooner you can flatten the curve, the more lives you're going to save. So anyway, this Columbia University study came out and said if we had started social distancing a week earlier, it would have saved 36,000 lives. And if we had started 2 weeks earlier, it would have saved 56,000 lives, which is amazing. It's a full fourth of the number of people who have died. And that it's just literally like,
Yeah.
should we start taking this seriously earlier, which we failed to do.
I mean, I've heard that it might even continue into 2021, which is really scary. Like if this just keeps going, and
Well, I think it will.
I was thinking about this the other day, like putting aside for a minute the horrible, the deaths and the sickness and that. Can you think of a president who is in recent history has been more directly responsible for just maybe not literally, but erasing an entire year of our lives, making it sort of this empty year that doesn't really count for anything, because everything kind of had to be put on hold. Again, if he had done something in the beginning, probably could have flattened the curve earlier and stopped some of this. But it's 6 months later, and we're still losing 1,000 people a day. And you turn on conservative news, and it's a different universe. There is no COVID. Everything is great. Everything's restarting. The president has defeated COVID.
Football's back.
Football's back.
Yeah, I mean, I think to answer your question, Daniel, about has there been a president that's been actively responsible for erasing 1 year of our lives, essentially, the answer is no, there hasn't. I mean,
there has not.
Not directly.
Really, there wasn't something Reagan did.
Not directly responsible, right? Like other presidents faced crises and maybe mishandled them very poorly. Obviously the Bush administration made some real mistakes in terms of their foreign policy. But in terms of just like the lives of American citizens, in continental America, just having their lives just upended the way they were, like, no, there was no other president, and Donald Trump is directly responsible for it. Like there are actions that he could have taken, should have taken, that would have made this situation a lot better. And now we know that not only was he just like ignorantly downplaying this virus, just pretending that he knew best, he actually knew the facts, and he knew how deadly this was, and he purposely decided to ignore that, and he led 190,000 Americans to their deaths. I mean, he led that march. I don't think there's any way to describe it other than that. And it should be damning, and it should be the end of him as president. He should be in jail. I mean, like this is an impeachable offense. This is everything. But again, now this is in the hands of voters.
And it's amazing because it's sort of like, I mean, I feel like Trump, he's always like, who could have seen this coming? It's like, all of us, when he was elected, we were like, this dude is an idiot and irresponsible, murderous, egotistical, narcissist, scam artist, used car salesman, fascist, all this stuff. I mean, maybe we wouldn't have predicted something I don't think anyone would have been like, well, yeah, in a couple of years, for a whole year, everybody's going to be stuck inside because of a massive pandemic. I mean, we had low expectations, Trump, but goddamn, man.
Yeah.
At least when it comes to this pandemic, I thought Trump was going to do better than this. I thought he would at least listen to one or two of his advisors, just say he's out of his league and just kind of let them handle it, and he can go golfing or something. And we would just get Congress to act, and he would just say, hey, yeah, wear a mask and socially distance. I'm out of here. But he couldn't even do that. I mean, he made the situation worse. And as president of the United States, that's the worst thing you could say about a president. You know, he was an agent acting on behalf of the virus.
Yes.
It's just so maddening about everything else that's going on. You're exactly right. I don't know which of you said it, but we did see this coming. You know, this terrible I mean, maybe not. We saw this fascism coming for sure.
Some other things that came out of the tapes, just real quick, so far at least. Woodward asked him about the notion of white privilege, and Trump responded, "No, you really drank the Kool-Aid, didn't you? Wow, just listen to you. Wow, no, I don't feel that at all." He got pissed off because he thought black people were not gracious enough for all that he's done for them. He bragged about a secret nuclear weapon program that was apparently very, very secret. He talked about how Kim Jong-un is the only one. No, sorry, I'm the only one that Kim Jong-un smiles with, which is a very strange thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, he also said that Kim Jong-un considered Obama to be an asshole, which,
I mean, doesn't everyone?
And he said that he's not sure why. This is what he said, quote, "It's funny, the relationships I have, the tougher and meaner they are, the better I get along with them. Explain that to me someday, okay?" Because he gets along with he gets along with the worst autocrats in the world. Those are the people he connects with.
Which should scare any American, really, but it doesn't.
He also said, "I saved his ass," talking about Mohammed bin Salman, because he managed to help him avoid accountability for the murder of U.S. journalist Khashoggi by the murderous Saudi regime. He bragged about how he saved him and helped him.
Yeah, what a piece of shit.
To be fair, he did say he thinks he's innocent, which I think everybody knows is not is not true. Trump's own intelligence networks say that MBS was intimately involved in the murder of Jamal Khashoggi.
Yeah, I mean it's and I'm sure the book's not out, right? Like it's still I know it's in the hands of media figures, but
it is, and I've read some reviews, and I did read the last line of the book, which I think is kind of humorous and very understated. The last line of the book says, quote, "When his performance as president is taken in its entirety, I can only reach one conclusion: Trump is the wrong man for the job."
Cool. Well, glad we know that now.
Understated. He's like, Trump is not qualified.
Wow. Very.
Give him a C-. Well, thanks for that, Bob Woodward. We really needed to know that piece of information. But anyways, yeah, that's because folks, as you look at your calendars, I'm sure you know what is quickly approaching. It is September the 10th. We are less than 2 months before Election Day. So what that means here is that, we're starting to get into the point where we're in the polls maybe matter territory. There's still time left for things to change. There's obviously we all remember 2016, where it's very likely that the election may have been decided by the Comey letter, which came out 10 days before the election. So it's not to say that where the race stands now is it's where it's going to be in November, but it's worth looking over now that we're in this punditry world to see if there's any kind of convention bounces, if there's any kind of effects going on after the protest in Wisconsin. And the answer is kind of a mixed bag. When it comes to national polling right now, Joe Biden didn't really see a whole lot of changes. He is, according to the Real Clear Politics average, again, Real Clear Politics is a website that basically is a depository for polls and really terrible articles. But I go there mainly for the polls. But in the national average, he's up by 7.5%, which Biden is. Joe Biden is up by 7.5%, which is a healthy lead nationally. Obviously, for whatever reason, we don't decide our president based on the popular vote. We decide it based on the Electoral College, which, if you look at that, Joe Biden is in the lead in the states he needs to win right now. But I'm just going to go over some states that Hillary Clinton lost that Joe Biden is currently ahead of. And I'll start with the states where he's doing the worst to the best. And the worst right now is Florida, where he's up by 1.2%, so almost tied. In North Carolina, Joe Biden is up by 1.5%. In Pennsylvania, he's up by 4.3%. In Michigan, he's up by 5%. In Wisconsin, he's up by 6.4%. These are all, and also in Arizona, he's up by 5.7%. These are all states that Hillary Clinton lost and Donald Trump won. Joe Biden does not need to win all of these states to get to 270 electoral votes, assuming he picks up all the other states that Hillary Clinton won. He just needs some of them. So it's encouraging to see him in the lead. But again, some of these are very, very small leads. And yeah, Daniel, as you mentioned, the one in Florida is one that kind of stands out because it's at 1.2. I actually saw that Nate Silver quoted this on Twitter, I believe. But before the convention, Joe Biden was up by more than 5 points. So I don't know. I don't know what caused these. Yeah.
The polling average?
The based on the polling average, he was up by 5. I don't know though. Like to me, this 1.2% makes a whole lot more sense historically than the 5% lead. I mean, that Florida, like notoriously, is always usually within the 2% popular vote there in that state. So this makes sense on paper, but I'm not sure if this is just kind of like a quote unquote reversion to the mean, or if it's like an actual movement that was caused by something. Maybe that Cuban dude that spoke in the Republican convention made an impact. I don't know.
Who called Biden Fidel Castro?
Yeah, I'm not sure. And yeah, it's one thing that you mentioned, Daniel, that polling is showing is that Joe Biden is underperforming Hillary Clinton with Hispanics. And I believe even with I think with the African American community, he's staying pretty much on par. But with Hispanics, he is underperforming Clinton, which could cause him problems in Florida, Arizona, Nevada. I mean, he's polling well in Arizona.
Hispanics are saying they're voting for Trump in these polls, or
yeah, and at least in Florida. And keep in mind, Florida's Hispanic community is different than what you're going to see in like Texas, in Arizona or Nevada. It's more conservative. It's more it's a higher population of Cuban Americans, whereas in other states you're probably going to see a higher percentage of Mexican Americans. So different backgrounds. So it's a different ball game altogether. But yeah, I mean, Donald Trump is doing considerably well. And now the caveat or the asterisk is that according to these polls, again, this is all under the whole realm that you actually believe the polls, which I think is relevant. I think it's relevant data, but it is an imperfect science. But Joe Biden is doing better among working class whites than Hillary Clinton is. So that's kind of the trade-off. And that's probably why even though Joe Biden is underperforming with Hispanics, he's still showing a lead in these states. But I think the main point that I actually kind of wanted to go over is that, last week there was a lot of punditry talk about the protest in Kenosha. A lot of people certain that if Joe Biden doesn't come out and forcefully call out Antifa and Black Lives Matter, he was doomed. There's been basically no change in Wisconsin in terms of his lead there. He's up by 6.4%, I believe. In fact, it might have gone up slightly, but it's still within that realm of being.
Because that's because he ran out there and condemned violence, or else he'd be tanking. We all know that.
Yeah, that one speech, and then on like a Monday morning is what changed everything. I'm sure
that did it.
But the reason I wanted to kind of bring this up is that I'm sure we're all getting quite a bit of like 2016 vibes, right? Where like and you mentioned it too, Sam, earlier with like kind of how the Bob Woodward tape release kind of mimics what's his name? Billy Bush, but who cares?
The Access Hollywood tape.
Yeah, the Access Hollywood tape. And again, just kind of like 2016, Hillary Clinton was showing leads in a lot of these swing state votes, especially in the Midwestern states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So I think there's always going to be nerves going on to this. And even though I try to play like, hey, these are the facts, this is the data, like I still kind of fall for it. Like when I see a Florida poll where shows Trump and Biden tied, like my heart sinks. And yet when I see like a Texas poll showing the same thing, I'm like, oh, Joe Biden's never going to win Texas. Yeah, like,
right.
Donald Trump's got that in the bag. So I don't know. And then I should mention one of these states that that Hillary Clinton did win that could be a pickup for Donald Trump is probably Minnesota. He is up by, actually, it just got updated. It was 3.7% yesterday, but now it's at 5.0%. I think there was just a new poll that came out today.
It was very
bump.
close in 2016, so I would not be surprised to see it flip.
I think it's the one, maybe that and maybe Nevada is the one state that Donald Trump could pick up that he didn't pick up in 2016. But other than that, I think he's probably going to play defense. I'm not going to make, again, a prediction about who actually is going to win the election. I'm not going down that route. But I do think that we are going to go into an election night almost with like the same thing that we saw in 2016, where it feels like Joe Biden has like a 60 to 70% chance to win, and then Donald Trump is like a 30, and we're all going to have those nerves. And keep in mind, all these models obviously the polls, but even like the 538 models and stuff, they're under the assumption that we're in like a well-functioning society where the president of the United States is not actively trying to sabotage the election, which that might be optimistic.
Yeah.
But I don't know. What any thoughts you guys have regarding these numbers, or anything that you're feeling, anything you're feeling anxious about or positive about? Daniel, let's start with you.
I feel anxious about everything and positive about nothing. I mean, it's just these margins in the swing states are just, I just feel like I can see them just evaporating.
Yeah.
I can viscerally feel them evaporating like I did in 2016 when I saw Florida fall.
Are you talking about the needle, the famous New York
Well,
Times?
no, it was more just when people were like, "Wow, Trump's getting a lot more votes in these rural places than we thought he would," and I was like, "Well, that's going to be a knock-on thing. That's going to happen in every other state. He's going to get more rural votes than they thought he would, so all those poll numbers are going to be wrong." And just having PTSD flashbacks to that right now, like I'm just looking at these and thinking of them like evaporating on election day.
No.
Just because the models are wrong, or the likely, I know they're using different likely voter screens now than they were. And 2016 again was within, I believe, within the margin of error in all the polls. But yeah, I just don't feel confident about Biden's chances.
I will say, I think the Joe Biden campaign would probably prefer you not feeling that confident, or anybody. I think they would prefer. Yeah, they would prefer. I mean, it's horrible for our mental health, but I think they would prefer you to be a little bit more engaged and then kind of like not take anything for granted, and obviously go out and vote, or maybe even like donate or volunteer. So that could be a positive. I'm just trying to cheer you up.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
But Sam, what about you? Like, how you feeling?
I feel very anxious as well. No matter what happens on election night, I'm either going to be drinking a $15 or 15-year scotch, or spraying champagne everywhere on the floor and drinking that. And the champagne is when Trump wins, and scotch is when Biden wins.
Well, scotch is better than champagne.
Yeah. I can't take any chances on this. I mean, I can't just be like, oh, it'll be fine. You know.
I mean, the only thing I would say about these polling numbers, and kind of to tie it back maybe to some of the stuff we were talking earlier, is that I know we freak out about these things. And again, I'm not predicting anything, but what I will say is an incumbent should probably be in a better position than this, especially shortly after a convention. I'm not sure. Maybe this is reflective of the fact that maybe some things do matter. Maybe the mishandling of the pandemic, the fact that Donald Trump has really sowed more chaos regarding the social unrest and the protests than actually calmed things down. Obviously, none of these polls reflected the Woodward thing, because that just came out very recently. But again, just another example of really the Trump campaign being on the defensive rather than trying to hit Joe Biden. Because, I mean, still, at the end of the day, this is a challenger leading almost every single swing state and being up by over 7 points in the national polling average, which historically speaking, again, it's early, it's September, but historically speaking, it's abnormal to see that.
I just wanted to say one more thing that really scares me is how abruptly the Republicans are cheating American people in states where they're. We talked about this like a couple episodes ago with the Voting Rights Act, but they're just denying
they're
people
actively
the right to vote,
suppressing the vote, and they're using this pandemic as an excuse to try to play with the election. I have no doubt in my mind.
It's multiple headlines a day too. You just sent me one recently, Gus, with the Wisconsin Supreme Court holding up the mail-in ballots because they are saying there's a conservative Supreme Court and they're saying, well, we need to figure out who's on the ballot, so none of them can be mailed out yet. So they're just holding them until they can clarify who's on the ballot. But
what does that even mean?
I'm not sure, but the consistent theme you get through all of these decisions is that they're trying to suppress the vote. They would prefer if people didn't vote. Gus, I don't know if you wanted me to talk about the financing thing.
Yeah, I was actually kind of mentioning that because in terms of an incumbent, usually an incumbent is the stronger fundraiser. They obviously have the power of the office. Technically speaking, they shouldn't use that, but obviously when you're the incumbent, it's going to be a little bit easier for you to donate or for you to fundraise, money. That's, in terms of the arms race, the money fundraising race, Joe Biden is actually doing considerably better, at least as far as the August numbers go. He raised around $364 million that month, which is an insane number. Trump did very well as well. He raised $210 million for that month, which in any other case would have been a very impressive number, but he actually trails Joe Biden by about $154 million for that month alone. $154 million is a lot of money last time I checked. So this, again, I don't know if this is just like what Trump's craziness is just inspiring, whether, obviously large donors, but a whole lot of small donors. I'm not certain, but you normally don't see such a gap between the challenger and the incumbent, where the challenger is actually the one ahead. But also an interesting story is how Donald Trump and his campaign has been managing his fundraising contributions.
Yeah, so there's a New York Times story called How Trump's billion-dollar campaign lost its cash advantage by Shane Goldmacher. And actually, when I reread this, I thought to myself, this is such a post-Trump New York Times story, because they're writing this almost like a little bit of a soft focus piece, a horse race piece about funding. And there's and buried within this piece is that the Trump camp managed to make $1 billion evaporate in a year and a half. But that's not what I mean. They do put it up how Trump's $1 billion campaign lost its cash advantage. I'm not telling the New York Times journalists how to do their job, but there's some stuff in here I feel like they maybe should have dug in a little more on. But the article goes through and says, talks about how Trump had raised 1.1 billion from the beginning of 2019 through July, and managed to spend 800 million of that, which is a lot. And now, 60 days before the election, some of the people in the campaign are worried about a cash crunch. The entire article, so this kind of happened under Brad Parscale, who was Trump's campaign manager originally for the 2020 run-up, and he was recently replaced by Bill Stepien.
I was just going to say, the Tulsa rally mastermind, Brad Parscale.
Oh, did he? Bill Stepien? I didn't realize
that.
No,
Brad Parscale was the one, and that's...
Yeah. Bill Stepien was involved in Bridgegate, which is another funny New York, New Jersey, Chris Christie story, but I won't get off on a tangent on that. But so they keep going in this article. They keep going to Parscale to ask him what the hell happened, And Parscale keeps giving the same answer, which is basically like some version of, he won't give any specifics on each one of the spending items they ask him about, but he's like, we built a great operation, and he always manages to slide in there, which I think is really funny. He's like, I'm so proud of the operation we built, and also every piece of spending was approved by the family every step of the way, which is he just happens to just slide in there that the family was approving all of his spending, because as the New York Times went through this, they realized that they were spending a lot of money. They spent $100 million on a television advertising blitz in the run-up to the convention, which is not the worst idea in the world. They also assembled a big and well-paid staff and housed them at a well-appointed office in the Virginia suburbs. They had outsized legal bills. One of the biggest and funniest to me spending was Trump spent $11 million on a 30-second Super Bowl ad because Michael Bloomberg did that, which cracks me the hell up. And it also cracked me up because when I read this, I thought to myself, well, I guess we'll see how it works out when the Super Bowl happens. And then I was like, oh wait, they're talking about last year. They're talking about 8 months ago. So I don't think it did very good. What else have they've hired highly paid RNC consultants. Mr. Trump's former bodyguard is being paid more than $500,000 by the RNC. They've spent $200,000. I'm not sure, actually. Probably something important. Just kidding. They spent $200,000 for planes to pull aerial banners. And they paid 100. Go ahead.
No, I just think that really that's what you call like targeting marketing, like spending aerial banners.
Well,
like
Trump did research and they realized that a lot of his potential voters spend all day just standing outside staring up into the sky.
Yeah.
So they
classic Trumpers.
Let's see. They spent $110 to buy magnetic pouches to put people's cell phones in so that nothing would ever leak. Because nothing ever leaks out of the Trump administration.
Yeah, I think there's no leak.
And anyway, they spent $110,000 on these pouches, and then Trump just calls up Bob Woodward.
Yeah.
And here is a classic example of the New York Times burying the lead, which is about paragraph 20 of this. A Republican strategist is quoted as saying, "Oh yeah, the reason they spent $1 billion, the reason that they're spending like fucking idiots is because they've been running this campaign for 4 years straight, it's a little bit of a no shit moment, and that campaigns are incredibly expensive, and Trump restarted his campaign immediately after he was elected. So of course, all of this money is being burned away in this never-ending campaign." And there's one more bury the lead quote from this article that I would like to read. Okay, so it was almost 280 million is being funneled into an LLC that the New York Times really couldn't figure out anything about, except that it was Laura Trump, Eric Trump's wife, and Donald Trump's girlfriend, or maybe fiance now, the one who screamed a lot at the RNC, are both collecting salary from this organization. So again, New York Times buried the lead. They put in paragraph 50 about it, a Republican-linked LLC that siphoned away $250 million and just into the ether, and nobody's quite sure where the money went. The New York Times does not seem to. Either they can't figure it out, and that's because if you're an LLC, you might be able to get away with not putting a lot of that stuff into the public record, or they didn't try for whatever reason. But
Right.
again, if I had written this article, I might have started with that and called it, how the Trump campaign stole $250 million or siphoned it away or something like that. But
nepotism never sells.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
it really is like a both sides kind of thing, right? I mean, it is like we're treating this as a horse race. Well, it is. They're treating it as a horse race article, even though it's $1 billion of donor money just being sort of burned away. I didn't touch on this, but it's also, another chunk of that money was funneled directly back into Trump's pocket via his businesses. Another 39 million was funneled right back into Parscale's pocket through his consultancy firms. Nobody ever said that political campaigns were the most honest work, but this is a new level of sort of corruption, and it just kind of bothered the hell out of me that the New York Times downplayed it to a certain extent by treating it as like well, Biden's raising more money now kind of story, instead of hey, why do they keep funneling millions and billions of dollars of donor money off into these strange LLCs and we never see them again?
Yeah. I mean, that's just, you would think, as in terms of investigating reporting, that would be by far the biggest story to follow, and by far it should very much be the headline and not a statement buried 20 paragraphs
they're
deep.
spending $1 million in ads in DC, which was like an 89% Democratic precinct.
So Donald Trump can see him and kind of nod approvingly. That's so reason.
Weird.
Yeah.
That's so weird. But
I
yes,
mean,
it is. What other reason is there?
Again, I don't know if there's probably no justice or logic in this world anymore, but if we were just to objectively look at this, like, obviously there's a terrible corruption, and really, yes, you're right, Daniel, the New York Times should be emphasizing on that more. But even if you just talk about the campaign, like this, the Trump campaign has not been impressive. They've not, as an incumbency campaign, they have not had a great strategy. I really actually think even their advertising has been a lot meeker and mild than I really was expecting it to be. It's not very effective. And even now, the fundraising, which again should be the main advantage of an incumbent presidency, it seems like they're giving that up, to ceding that ground to the Biden campaign. We live in a strange universe, and all of this could happen. He did get outspent back in 2016, and he still won. So that does not set anything in stone. But what a shitty campaign.
Yeah, but in 2016, the media gave him like free videos on him, or free information.
Yeah, it's not a 1-to-1, and I think, especially now, the biggest difference is Donald Trump is not a wait and see candidate, or like let's try it out candidate. We know who he is. We've had 4 years of him as president. People should be able to easily make up their minds whether they want four or more. But I mean, in terms of how that's going to decide the outcome, we're just going to have to watch and see. So, boy, we're kind of short on time here, guys. So I'm going to call an audible here. I'll ask you guys what we have. Two things. We can either go to the Falwell story, or do you guys prefer sharing just some things that you've been watching or reading lately?
I can summarize the Falwell story. Falwell liked to watch his wife get fucked by another dude and jerk off.
Cool.
And then Michael Cohen, Trump's shitty lawyer, got pictures of that, and maybe probably extorted them into endorsing Trump and potentially sliding him into victory. So that's a really funny story.
Yeah, and I don't like to king shame, but if I'm gonna king shame anybody, it's Jerry fucking Falwell. So
yeah, man, fuck that guy.
So let's just go ahead and move on to our final topic. Again, I know, guys, listeners, that was a lot of Trump talk. Again, we're in a pandemic. We should at least be spending our majority of time at home. There's not a lot of movies out there in the world. There's not a lot of video games coming out. So I appreciate you guys bearing with us, and hopefully you find our topics engaging. But we always do want to try to end it on a lighter note. So Sam, let's start with you. You a couple of episodes back, you mentioned that you're watching a new, more lighthearted anime, and it sounds like you finished it.
Yeah, I'll just give like a quick synopsis real quick in case anyone missed the last episode, but it's called Amagi Brilliant Park. It's basically this anime about a theme park where they're not having a lot of visitors and they're going to be bought out by this. There's a specific day unless they get like a certain number of visitors. I won't ruin the ending for you guys, but I'll just say it anyway. Not just kidding. But what I liked about it is with all this stuff going on in the world and all this stuff going on in our country, it just took me away from everything that's bad. It made me laugh. It made me feel like things could get back to normal, but I wasn't that hopeful. I really liked it. If you want an anime that'll just, bring you laughs and smiles during this crazy time and, unbelievable time, I suggest you watch it. I also saw for the first time Spirited Away a couple of weeks ago.
Awesome. Finally, our anime expert got around to this.
He didn't like it. He didn't like it very much.
That's not true.
What did you think, Sam?
I did like it. It was very weird. I think a lot of Miyazaki's films have a lot of similarities. Our two big similarities, I guess, is like the power of friendship and working hard to get where you want to be. I liked it. It was very, I might even say creepy, but it was very good. It's not my favorite Miyazaki film, but it's a good film. It's good anime.
Did you like feel any of those comparisons to I'm sorry, what was the Uzumaki?
Amagi Brilliant Park.
Amagi.
Yes. The comparison between them, there's not a lot of comparison. They do have I think the big difference between them is that Amagi Brilliant Park is trying to bring in weird humor and use it to its advantage. On the opposite side, Spirited Away is just trying to be weird or maybe not weird, but unusual will probably be a better word for it. And
I found it a little like unsettling, even.
Yeah,
like kind of creepy. Yeah.
And try and make you feel something. That's not a usual thing that you feel or that you do when you watch Miyazaki movies. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed both of them. I'll certainly try. What you mentioned about Amagi. I'm sorry, I can never remember the name of Amagi Brilliant Park, about it being a lighthearted piece of entertainment during these times. I think that makes it very appealing. Very different from the previous anime you mentioned, Welcome to NHK, which I think kind of hit you on a more personal level, played with anxiety and mental health. So it's always good to have a lighter distraction, to kind of ease things as we deal with the madness. So thank you, Sam. I appreciate the input. So Daniel, you also wanted to bring up a book that you're currently, very interesting book that you're currently reading that may be getting its, is it TV adaptation possibly coming soon?
Yeah, I think it's a Netflix. I think they're making it into a series. It's a trilogy of books called I believe it's called In Remembrance of Earth trilogy. The first book in the series is called The Three Body Problem, which is what they're naming the show after. Much like with A Song of Ice and Fire, they called the whole series Game of Thrones. They gave it to David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, I think, which caused a lot of discourse, as you might imagine.
Who are the Game of Thrones showrunners?
Sure, right? Yeah. David Benioff and D.B. Weiss were the Game of Thrones showrunners. And I don't know how everyone else on here feels, but I think they did a good job with Game of Thrones, at least the first few seasons. And I think once they got off book, there was a tangible drop in quality of the show. I know a lot of people were not happy with the last season and how it ended. I was not ecstatic about it, but I did not think it was that far off the sort of path of that show. And I actually kind of enjoyed it. You know, qualifying that by saying, there was a drop in quality in that show. This is, so some people are a little worried because this is a hard sci-fi book. It is, there's a lot of physics, there's a lot of philosophy. It's a Chinese book, originally written in Chinese. The book has footnotes up the wazoo, references to Chinese philosophy, Chinese history, Chinese culture, and the science is thorny. Famously, and maybe not famously, but the end of the first book, and I'm not going to spoil anything here, but the end of the first book has a very hard science ending. It's not a very classic, traditional cinematic sci-fi ending. It's very hard science. So people are understandably concerned that Benioff, Weiss are going to take this book. Oh, by the way, this book is written by Liu Cixing, and I apologize for mispronouncing that, and translated by Ken Liu, and they will be working closely with Benioff and Weiss. And so, I get it. I understand why people might be afraid that some of the nuance might be stripped out of what is really a very sophisticated and complex book, in favor of sort of making it dumb, fun, weird sci-fi.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, Daniel. This series, is it done? Like the books, are they is the series done?
The books are done. Yeah, I believe the last book was published in 2010. It wasn't translated into English until years later, but yeah, they're all done. So it's not going to run into the problem of D&D having to sort of make up the ending to it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's a big thing, because I would say that the Game of Thrones, the show that actually worked within the adaptation of the books that were actually out, that's the strongest part of that entire series. And I felt like they actually did do a fairly decent job of obviously making it a mainstream adaptation, but they worked with George R.R. Martin, and they still, as somebody who listened, or I'm sorry, read the books way before the show ever came out, like I always felt it was a very faithful adaptation to it. And it wasn't until they finally got past it where it really did seem like they were maybe out of their league, and they Hollywood, I don't know, made it a little bit
sound like
more
they were
Hollywood.
Bored.
Yeah,
they were bored, and they were just like, we've been doing this for so long, let's just kind of rush through it. And they were kind of frustrated because they were kind of having to unravel Martin's mess.
Yeah, I think
he did not help them with that.
Yeah, that show probably most definitely would have been better if they had worked with a complete work of literature that they're adapting, and they didn't. They ran out of book material, and they had to kind of tell the story with probably they got 2 sheets of paper from George R.R. Martin, just probably bullet pointing how the book should end, and that's just not a great way to work with that material. So maybe on the bright side, they could do a great job with this if they're working with the authors from beginning to end.
Yeah, that is it's one of those situations where I'm very willing to sort of give them a chance, while at the same time noting that look, in an ideal world, this probably would have been in the hands of maybe a Chinese American showrunner of some sort, or somebody with maybe just a little more. But that being said, I'm not going to prejudge it. The D&D have done some good stuff, done some not so great stuff. The Wolverine movie, X-Men Origins.
X-Men Origins.
That was written by, I believe, David Benioff. But I go back and forth because there's a lot. It is one of the stories where I think they could do a really good job. There's this concept in the series, and again, I'm not going to spoil anything. It has to do with it's set in China, and I hope that they don't like take this out of China, because honestly, I don't even think the story would make sense out of China, because it has a lot to do with the Cultural Revolution and things like that, which is, you know, the Maoist attempt to sort of get the right-wing elements out of society, and which involved things like struggle sessions, which were these sessions where, you know, the leftists, the communists would all stand around and scream at people they thought were insufficiently loyal to the communist cause, and, you know, often turn into physical violence. That's all. These are all parts of this book, and are very important to the meaning of the book. So I would be very frustrated if they sort of took it out of this context and made it star like an American or something. Yeah, that would be. I'm hoping that they don't do that. Does not seem like they're going to do that. Again, I can't even imagine how they do that, because again, this is a very Chinese story. You can't. It's hard to imagine it being told. It's like trying to imagine Huckleberry Finn not in America. It just doesn't compute.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I'm glad you brought that up, because obviously I haven't read the book, so I have no experience with the story, but I wasn't even considering, you know, with the issues around race, ethnicity, culture, and how that should be faithfully adapted when I was, you know, talking about when maybe if we should, if it might be in safe hands, so long as we're, you know, those books are finished and they're working closely with the authors. But you're right. I mean, it should be faithful in all regards, including, you know, in regards to culture and race and ethnicity.
I mean, it goes into some deep places about, you know, physics and is what's underneath the physics, and does that match up with, you know, various philosophies, you know, and it's all very fascinating. But I'm just hoping they don't sort of dumb it down to, oh, it's weird, freaky sci-fi, you know. That's my concern, and they sort of take these cultural aspects, which really give it its complexity and make it a great book. I'm just hoping they don't sort of cut all that out and just make it like, oh, look at this weird sci-fi, because there's definitely, you know, I read the synopsis. You know, I read this book a couple of years back, and I read the synopsis in preparation for this, and it's got kind of a strange plot, and I can definitely see how if you dumb it down, it could turn it into, like, I don't know, Ready Player One, something like very dumbed down and very. But I'm hoping that they, you know, I trust them to handle it with a little bit of sophistication.
Yeah, here's hoping. We'll just have to wait and see. Well, thank you, Daniel. Honestly, I look forward to maybe checking out the books. Certainly before I even consider watching the adaptation. It sounds like the book material is really where you want to go to first to really try to get a grasp of everything. But I appreciate that. We'll see how that adaptation turns out. But folks, oh boy, what an episode! Lots to talk about. That one of our longer episodes. So I want to thank Daniel, Sam. Thank you so much for joining me and for being part of this excellent conversation.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you as well.
And I also want to thank our listeners. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us, listen to this episode. I hope you find all of our topics to be enjoyable and all of our conversations to be at least a little bit insightful. So once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. And I do want to say, you know, I haven't mentioned this in a long time, and I do apologize, but I want to let our listeners know that if they have any questions and concerns, they can certainly email us. Sam, if you don't mind, can you mention our email address?
Sure, it's friendly.reminderthepodcast@gmail.com. That's friendly.reminderthepodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you, Sam. So yeah, thank you so much. I will go ahead and see you next week for yet another episode of Friendly Reminder.